Well, more now on the escalating tensions across the Middle East. Amid concerns, Israel's war against Hamas could now focus on a ground offensive in the city Rafah. Currently, the city hosts more than half of Gaza's total population, many of whom were displaced by fighting in the north of the territory. Well, joining me now from Washington is Laura Blumenfeld, former senior policy advisor to the State Department's Israel-Palestinian negotiating team. Good to have you with us. Let's just first talk about this seemingly de-escalation. Of course, there was that strike on the diplomatic compound of Iran in Syria, and then we've seen those massive strikes against Israel, and now this strike back from Israel on Iran. All, as far as analysts telling me are concerned, muted and carefully calibrated. Do you think now we are finally seeing the end of at least this phase of the escalation?
Well, look, these were free sample missile attacks, a kind of taste of retaliation without paying the price. But there is a sense of unease over the region. As your correspondent said, there were strikes overnight in Iraq. There's things going bump in the night, and we're not sure where they're coming from. But the only thing that's certain is that there'll be more.
Right, exactly. And so where do you think this explosion in Iraq, we can't confirm who did it or what it's about, but where do you think that fits into the bigger picture?
Well, what's fascinating is we've managed to avert regional war through compelling storytelling, right? It's all about how the spin, various actors are saying, this wasn't me, this wasn't me. That's the question that we're all asking ourselves. As long as it isn't out in the open, it seems like folks save face and then they can move forward. So I think that's what we're going to hope for now. I do have the sense, especially from the Israelis, that this was just a down payment on their payback and that there is more to come. But if they keep it in the shadows, maybe it will stay that way.
Yeah, exactly. As you referred to, there were shadow wars ongoing, weren't there? This seems to have been a distraction of sorts, perhaps, from what's going on in Gaza, about Israel's offensive in Gaza. A lot of people saying that favoured Prime Minister Netanyahu. We'll come to Gaza shortly. Of course, that's important to look at as well. But what do you think the impact of all of this has been on the situation inside Israel?
Well, I think one thing that's fascinating is if President Biden can turn this sort of attack on Iran into a way of finding an end game in Gaza, right? One of the criticisms of the administration is that the Israelis don't have an end game for Gaza. The Israelis are not motivated by Gaza, but they are motivated by Iran. So what is the U.S. end game with Iran? And perhaps use that to mobilize a force. We saw it on last Saturday night. It was spectacular, the pushback on the aerial defense against Iran's strike. If they can use Iran as kind of to dangle it to motivate the Israelis, President Biden has put a kind of marker on the wall with humanitarian aid. He said 350 trucks a day, at least 100 going to the north. The Israelis seem to be making an effort there. They're not going all in on Rafah as far as we can tell. So kind of use Iran, the coalition against Iran, this kind of coalition for coexistence of moderate Arab states and Israel and European allies to push back on the axis of resistance.
That's interesting, but then the axis of resistance, of course, includes Hamas, and it's Hamas that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government are saying why they need to go into Rafah and why they need to complete, as they say, get the job done, despite the fact we know that more than 1 million people are crammed into Rafah. How does that all work then?
So much about this war, even starting on October 7th, isn't so much about being strong, it's about being smart. And you heard it in Secretary Blinken's comments, public comments this week when he was advising the Israelis. He said to sort of be calculated and smart and strategic. I think the same advice applies to Rafah. The Israelis know how to get things done when they're trying. I think the concern was all along how you fight this war matters, to echo Secretary Blinken's words, and they haven't been trying hard enough. But perhaps the threat of Iran and seeing how they're all related will motivate them.
And Laura, I wonder what your take is on the relationship between the United States and Israel, given you're just saying, what Secretary Blinken has been saying just yesterday. We heard him reiterate this at the G7 in Capri. Oftentimes, throughout the last 7 months, we've seen the United States give very public advice to Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel, and yet it's not often heeded.
Well, look, the United States is in a very interesting position. The Iraq war remorse is real. I mean, you're seeing it in Congress. There's, a pocket of congressional Democrats who are pushing back on this offensive weapons anyway, aid package to Israel. That hangs over us. We're very sort of, concerned about putting boots on the ground. And when we want the Israelis to learn from our mistakes, this is our second chance. So some say that by keeping Israel close, you can moderate their behavior. It's kind of the international theory of bear hugs, strategic squeezing. And we have seen some success with that.
And where do you, or when really, do you think that these kind of ceasefire negotiations will turn into some kind of longer term solution, Laura? If we talk about timing, because time is obviously of the essence. We've had more airstrikes in Rafah overnight.
Well, first of all, in terms of the ceasefire, I think folks are waiting on Hamas, and the sort of the line out there from the administration is we would have had a ceasefire 6 weeks ago if Hamas had taken the deal on the table. So interestingly, the frustration has now tipped toward Hamas and a little bit away from Israel. But as far as the larger war wrapping up, I don't think we're going to see this completely over until Israel deals with the North. Military leaders for years, they sound like the prophet Jeremiah, from the Bible, talking about an evil shall come to us from the north. And that's been the big threat kind of hanging over the country, even more immediate and existential than Iran.
Laura Blumenfeld, always good to have your insight. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.